welcome to PT's podcast, where we dive into issues that matters to you. This is our first episode. I'm your host, Sally, and I'm joined by my colleagues. They'll introduce themselves. And today is Youth Day, and we're going to have conversations about Youth Day, and specifically Gen Z and governance. So, Karibu, tell us your name.
Asante sana. My name is Abondo Evans Diambo. I'm Pamoja Trust staff under the banner of civic engagement and advocacy. Asante sana.
Hi guys, so my name is John Kiarie. I'm from Pamoja Trust at the civic engagement and advocacy, and I'm a Gen Z representative.
We are all Gen Zs. We identify as Gen Zs. So because it's Youth Day and we've been seeing the movements that Gen Zs have been having recently in terms of governance questions. So I think that's what we're going to discuss today, just how the current youth are engaging on governance issues. But first of all, we need to understand who are the Gen Zs, because there's a Gen Z here. There are some of us who identify as Gen Zs. So who is a Gen Z, Evans?
Well, I know Gen Zs are defined by their the year of birth, that period between the year of birth to a later time. And I would say people who were born between 1997 to somewhere around 2005.
97 to 2000. So the oldest Gen Z is around 28 years now.
28.
And the youngest Gen Z is how old?
The youngest should be around 10 years. Not 10.
The last Gen Z should have been born in 2008. Is it 2008? 2012.
Okay. So then the oldest is...
so
probably
around 12, 13 years.
Yeah,
so
sure,
that's the youngest Gen Z. Yeah. Okay. So what's the difference between a Gen Z and a millennial?
Okay.
I believe Gen Zs, they're the ones who were born during the revolution of the digital era.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The millennials were born in the digital era.
Not the Gen Zs.
The Gen Zs were born, but millennials were also born in the digital era. Actually, it is the millennials who were born within the introduction of the digital, and the onset of the digital era.
Yeah. Because digitalization took phase muchly between in the early 90s to the late 90s. I mean, not early 90s, but somewhere between 90s to 2000 here, before you guys were born. So then after 2000, henceforth, now it took the global stage, and now a lot of people could access. But previously, of course, we were seeing digitalization being mostly on the developed world. But now come 2005 henceforth, now it trickled down to this other part of the world, and people were able to access it. It was easy for us to access internet spaces. Yeah, a lot of digitalization.
So I'm just thinking, so are millennials different from Gen Zs? Because they're both, though millennials are born on the onset of the digital era, the Gen Zs are born into it. So I'm wondering because we've defined Gen Zs, some of their characteristics is that they are more tech savvy than the millennials. So what is really their difference? Even before we get into the issues governance, because it seems there's a difference, but there's no difference between these two generations.
Personally, thank you, Sally. Personally, I think it's different when you're born when something is at its initial stages, and when you're born when something is already in its center stage. So when I'm born, when digitalization is in its initial phases, it means then I'll equally be part of the team that is grappling with even understanding the digital platforms. I'll be also grappling equally. I will also be trying to find our ways in first, even before even that, just understanding what it is, trying to even buy these gadgets.
It's something still developing.
Exactly. Yeah. But now when I'm born, when it's already there, it means I'm in that world already. So even at an age of 2 years already, I'm I'm engaging with these mobile platforms. I'm engaging with the digital space. Nowadays we see kids, even at 2 years, kids are in Twitter. Their mothers are posting them, so they're already born within the digital space. So it's something that it's part of their life. So it becomes easy for them to contemplate.
I'm just thinking, is the difference only in like the technology or the digital era, or do you think, John, there are other differences between the two generations? Most of the two generations.
According to me, I believe that the difference is the governance. Our Gen Zs, most of the Gen Zs, they were during the Kibaki era. During the Kibaki era was where there was the economic transformation. There was introduction of new technologies, smartphones. I believe that might be the main difference between millennials and Gen Zs. The opportunity that arise due to good governance.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if that's a difference, because the millennials also lived during this time, the Moi era, a bit of the Moi era. Most of the millennials were young or children during the Moi era, and then teenagehood during Kibaki era. I mean, we are the generations, and I now identify as a Gen Z, but I'm a millennial. We are the generation that have been through all the political, all the 4 presidents that we've had as a country. But one thing that I have witnessed with the Gen Zs in the workforce, when I was new in the workforce, I would see most new entrants, new employees. There was a bit of anxiety, or they were a bit. You could see someone is a bit timid, or even the interview you would tell someone is not. The confidence levels are not. Yeah, so I think that is a difference that I've seen between the two generations. The Gen Zs appear to be more confident with whatever they are doing, or whichever places they are, than the millennials. And for me, I see millennials as people who kind of suffer from some form of anxiety. I don't know if you've seen it that way.
Yeah, it's true, because if you go to a place where maybe Gen Zs have been brought in as attaches or interns, they associate with fellow colleagues is very different compared to millennials. Just as you've mentioned, millennials were, number one, composed, I think, and then they are confined within their space until that time when now they feel they could engage other people. But it's very different from a Gen Z. The first day a Gen Z gets in there, would want to interact with people, they converse here and there. And then they're not even shy also to put in public the kind of life they live. So say if it's a party person, you'll just know in a day or two that this one is a party person, this is a party. Yeah. Unlike the millennials who are so much...
can we say living in pretense?
Yeah, of course. And that brings me to my point that Gen Zs are not afraid, are not ashamed of
and I think
kind of lifestyle.
You could say it's upbringing. It could be attributed to different upbringing. Yeah.
Okay. But again, even in terms of, I think the freedom, their spaces, I think Gen Zs are more of a free space, free society. Because even one of the conversation you hear when them saying is that, for instance, in a job setting, they will want to be in a workplace from 8 a.m. to 5, like the normal way. You see, we, the millennials, are used to that kind of work where you get to work early morning.
We are used to, we are conditioned.
Yeah, you are conditioned to that kind of.
Yeah.
Gen Zs want a space where you come, work according to the task that is in front of you, and leave, go do other things, you see. So I think that is not only a condition that they need, but I think it's also brought by the fact that they need a lot of freedom. They are in the liberty to do whatever thing they want. So that me as the boss, I don't confine them in a building for an entire day, telling them, you have to be here for me to pay you your end month. You have to, as much, even though you don't have anything to do, just be around. That is the kind of the job market we were introduced to. But the Gen Zs want a situation where they get to work. Maybe it's 9. They know that we are working here for maybe 2 hours. After 2 hours, I go do my other stuff. That kind of a freedom and liberty to engage in other things apart from the mainstream work. Yeah.
As a millennial, Jonte, growing up, nilikuwa unaambiwa now I am working class. And you're going to the office in the morning and you come back in the evening and you're suited up and it should be like a positive thing. And I think that's like part of the conditioning that the Gen Zs do not have. Even their dressing in the workplace, it's different. But generally, I don't think there's a big difference. But no, when we look at... yes.
According to me, I believe that the millennials, during their education time, let's say not a lot of people were educated as compared to right now Gen Zs. Many people are educated and there are no job opportunities. That's why
the agitation is so much.
That's why you tell me to come work here from 9 to 5, yet I have qualifications. But the salary is
it's not meeting the qualification, right?
Meeting the qualifications at all. Even underemployment, you find yourself in you studied maybe as a specific course, but the line of work that you are in is totally different from your career. So I believe that is one of the main differences between Gen Zs and millennials.
As we are comfortable with doing what we did not study, but you guys are not comfortable with that. That's why you don't want to be confined in an office space for the entire day.
Exactly.
Okay. But something else that I like, Sally, as we conclude, is how they perceive even the work environment. Gen Zs are not these people who put on ties and suits to go to work.
But is that a bad thing?
It's a nice thing.
If your profession requires that you wear a tie and a suit.
And I think that is the thing. Gen Zs do not recognize things like the standard operational procedures. Like this is how a lawyer should look like. This is how.
I mean, they're not limited. I would want to say Gen Z are innovative. They don't want to be confined. In whatever situation or in whatever. I think they're innovative. But now, surprisingly, for a long time, people have looked at other generations, and I think it's something that happens with all the generation, even the generation before the millennials. That is it's not baby boomers, generation X. It's generation X that is before the millennials. Whatever generation it is, there's always a thing that the generation that is before the other generation looks down upon the other generation in terms of qualifications to be in certain spaces, qualifications to talk about politics and all that. And I think that happened with the Gen Z. We looked at them as these people who are not really serious with life, who cannot really fit in the workplace. And there are conversations of, we wonder how the world would look like in 20 years to come when the Gen Zs would be in control. But there has been a total shift of how we look at the Gen Zs, because Gen Zs right now, I don't know if you can say they have already... they're uprising or they are already there, but in Kenya now we've seen the Gen Z take on government when it comes to issues governance. So maybe we talk about why do we think the Gen Zs are currently involving themselves so much in issues governance, and how do we contradict how we look at the Gen Zs now? Not really contradict, but how do we balance away the Gen Zs that we thought Gen Zs are and the current Gen Zs?
The first thing, I think we should congratulate our late President Mwai Kibaki for our education system, because the free education system created more elite people in our society. So hence, according to the current protests that were happening, I believe most people related that from the set books that they learned in high school, like Kigogo to Mulisilo Shiba. So they are just like, how do you mean? This is what we used to learn. They are actually really interesting books. I believe that that's the first thing that we should consider well, talking about the Gen Z revolution.
Yeah.
And the second is maybe the challenges, because most likely they are the challenges that the youths face that have caused the uprising of the maybe the protest and the inclusion of youth in government and political sceneries.
So challenges like.
Okay, I believe as I had said earlier, like there's high unemployment rates, underemployment,
Yeah.
corruption, the lack of accountability
But
from the
then, let me
government.
cut you short. Do you think that is it high employment rate or low employment rate has been the case because now we have more people who are educated and who are also getting into the into the work market, the job market, because kitambo people, and it's not even it kitambo, our parents, the baby boomers, people now who are in either their 70s or even 60s, they would finish school. If you're a teacher, you would finish school immediately, you get a job. For lawyers, they will tell you when immediately they finish, or even before they finish the Kenya School of Law, someone is already appointed to become a magistrate, which is not the case right now. So I don't know the low employment, the challenge with the low employment also has come with the level of education, as you said before, also increasing. But yeah, Evans.
I think it's both. The demand for the jobs here outside is so high. But again, equally, we wouldn't say that people are so many and the government is not able to meet this demand. Because you see, we could say such if we are seeing the effort to actually create these jobs. And like for instance, in industrialization, that will be the one key sector to consider. Because industrialization absorbs a large number of workforce. But you see, now we are not even seeing these industries for the first place that now will even help the government absorb some of this workforce we are having in Kenya. So as much as we'll say there's a burst in the number, in the population of the people seeking for these jobs, we'll equally put blames in our systems because we are not seeing that deliberate action to create these platforms. If, for instance, in each and every county in Kenya, you could be having, say, 2 industries each, where we just have this number of people being absorbed directly, you could say, the government is making some effort, but we're not seeing this. And this is the agitation that is, driving this uprising and movements we are seeing in the past few months in Kenya. Because they're saying, look, guys are living lavish life, our leaders are living lavishness and all that. Yet we, the people who are supposed to be benefiting from, the whatever resources are not in the, just like the VC said, the shareholding thing. So these people are not feeling like part of, the government because their issues are not being addressed, and people are just comfortable with the status quo. People are just saying, okay, that is, especially with the millennials and the people before us, we're saying, tumezoea watu, hivyo ndio wanakuanga so. But the Gen Z are saying, no, sisi hatutaki kuzoea mtu na tujazoea mtu yoyote. This is what we demand. This is what we want.
There's a thing that says, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. But because the old tricks that our politicians use is embezzlement of funds, corruption, the projects are not being implemented right. So I believe that's why most Gen Zs, they want a new form of governance in the institutions because they do not believe anymore in the traditional political system in Kenya. Yeah,
I think it's also more of apart from the taxation, I think it's also being fed enough, and it's like saying, if this is not working, if this is what people are doing, then why don't we shift to a different kind of system which will now address our issues? Because even apart from if you listen keenly to the to the mandamanos that were going on, the issue was not only about taxing, and the issues are not only about the lavish lives of these politicians.
Yeah.
But it was quite a myriad issues that were being brought on board. You know, the issues of transparency, the issues of how the kind of dates we are having.
Transparency still connects to corruption.
Transparency still connects to corruption.
And maybe participation.
And participation. Unresponsive government, and you see the kind of arrogance that our leaders are having. You see, those are the things that were really making, the Gen Zs to be agitated. But again, the biggest thing that the Gen Zs were talking about is really the lack of job for these people. That is that was like the major issue at the helm there. But now there are other issues that they were equally addressing, especially in terms of inclusion, in terms of engaging them in the governance processes, because they are saying, look, the majority of the population is like 60% of Kenyans are youths. But again, if you look at the cabinet, none of the youths are represented. If you look at
it's not none. Let's say kidogo. It's very.
No, but do we have a cabinet that is a youth?
Yeah, we currently have. There's a cabinet CS, what's cabinet secretary, who is actually my age mate.
Okay. Now currently.
So that's currently, but before that there was none. And I think those are part of the efforts, or I could say part of the success that the Gen Z could say that the movement or the demonstrations that we've had has attributed to. But also, let's just say, right now we are thinking that, or most people would think that this is the time that the youth or the Gen Zs, because it's both the Gen Zs and the millennials who have been really yes, with the demonstrations. But if you look at when was the times of Kina Matiba? Was it Kina Matiba or Karaoke? This guy who was assassinated, where the University of Nairobi students demonstrated after his. Was even assassinated. He's called JM Karaoke. And there are students, and that was during the Moi era, and the students who really demonstrated against his assassination, and they ended up continuing their studies in Uganda because they were not safe in the country. And you can see the youth were on the forefront of that. Again, in like even other countries, like in Nigeria, during the SARS, what is SARS in full? The end SARS in Nigeria demonstration. There's the police and the police blue. There's a department or some sort of institution that was formed to deal with police brutality issues, robbery and all that. And this was also led by the youth. I don't know if the Black Lives Matter was also led by the youth. So I would love to think that there's always something in the youth. It's like change or proper change or revolution is always brought by the youth.
It's the same thing that is happening if you look at the Bangladesh scenario. It's the youth that are driving that conversation. If you look at the previous demonstrations in China, they are the youths. And I think it's simply because, number one, the youths have the energy. A person like my parent, for instance, will not be able to go to the streets.
You as a millennial, do you have the energy? I
have the energy, full energy. So, but now people now, the generation before me do not have that energy, number one. And then, of course, even apart from energy, many youths are unemployed. Then it becomes easy for them to even engage in these demonstrations. Because if I have my work that I'm doing and my employer is expecting me back at my workplace, then I would maybe find time to go and demonstrate. So, and then thirdly, apart from the two that I've mentioned, I think the youths are the ones who could articulate these issues easily because they engage with these people, they engage with these platforms. They're the number one recipient when it comes to, any initiatives, especially at community level. So you'll always find youths being available. And that's why most of the time, even in our community meetings, when you want to have youths in the meeting, it is so easy for you to have youths in these meetings compared to the elderly. They'll tell you, I have a business I have to run. I'm going to my farm. I have a what to do, this and this errand. But youth, it is so rare for you to hear youth telling you, I'm not able to come to that meeting. They'll always come. That's why you find that it's easy for them
to engage. When you say we, for the purpose of our audience, he means Pamoja Trust and what we do. And we didn't, it's our first episode, so we we are trying to see what works
Catch up.
and what will not work. So I
Yeah.
think it's also good for us to introduce Pamoja Trust and what Pamoja Trust does, which we'll do after maybe this question that I want to ask. John T talked about uliongelelea Kibaki with education and the Gen Zs being well educated, and in this space that we are in as an organization, we are a non-governmental organization and we do a lot of advocacy and a lot of civic engagement to our citizenry. Do you think that parts of the Gen Z's acts or the Gen Z's involvement in governance has been due to, or we could attribute it to, strong NGOs or strong CSOs, civil society organizations who are doing a lot of advocacy on issues like budget on the ground?
Okay.
Could you attribute it to? No, it's
Actually.
Let me start, and then Jonte comes in. I think yes, that will be my answer. Because number one, most of these revealings we are seeing in our country, most of the reporting we are getting, most of the analysis that is done by the civil society organizations. For instance, the Institute on Economic Affairs has done so well in trying to expound some of these debt issues. They've been telling us what exactly. They really unpacked the finance bill back in May. They really talked around the debt issues and questions whether do we really have debts to pay and what exactly did these debts fund, those kind of conversations. And I think if you look at the space, civil societies are playing a big role in terms of just making citizens aware. And I think most of this awareness that we've witnessed is through civil society organizations, because apart from the Auditor General, who's mandated to put public, the transactions within the government, then the other entity will be the NGOs. And they've played a very big role in terms of unpacking these, policies, in terms of monetary policies, in terms of public participation, what is required of the government, what the government needs to do in terms of reaching to communities. Those kind of things can really be attributed to the work that NGOs do. If you look at the analysis that are taking place within our media platforms, it's majorly NGOs that are conversing on these spaces, and through that conversations, people are able to understand what exactly is going on. You'll rarely find a government office or an agency coming to the media to articulate issues on how money has been spent, unless they are requested by the media houses. Without that, then you'll always find that the NGOs are the ones doing this, having these conversations on finance, and that has made people really aware of what is going on.
John, do you think there's some of these acts can be attributed to the CSOs?
Yeah, I actually know that for a fact, because there was a time I was going home, and then I meet some of my friends. They were from participating in public participation, such forums which were hosted by NGOs. So I believe actually they after those forums, they get some really good insights on the political scenery, on the general picture of the political arena, and how it will affect us. Let's say the youth, they also have their own say in political matters. So I believe that NGOs and civil society organizations have really played a crucial part in raising awareness.
There's the Gen Zs, part of the success that the Gen Zs have, or the youth, the Kenyan youth has had, wamepata kutoka kwa the demonstrations, as we said, the use of or the involvement, the use of digital, the use of technology in mobilizing, which I don't know if CSOs really use technology to mobilize or organize societies, but they have used technology more. I remember there's someone who was saying that during the demonstrations, there's an app that the demonstrators were using, and you could talk to each other. It's like walkie-talkie. You could talk to each other. If you're on these streets, na kuna kasanse, Bukarao inaitwa kasanse, sanse. If there are police around that street, you're able to tell the other people so that they don't come to this other street, which is, I think, good use of technology. And I don't know if civil society organizations have reached to that level. So you see that the Gen Zs have been kind of influenced by the civil society organizations, but the way they have been able to mobilize themselves is kind of a bit advanced than what the civil society organizations are doing. They are more organized. Their use and involvement with the digital and technology is also a bit more advanced.
I think it's a scenario of feed me, feed you situation, because the civil societies have fed youths in terms of knowledge, feeding them in terms of knowledge, in terms of even just understanding, articulating issues. But now Gen Zs took it and put it to another level, where now they took the information they had, but now turned the information to be more of a tool, and then now getting it back to the civil societies to adopt the kind of tools they've developed. So I think one complemented the other, but the other now took the whole event to another level. And I think it is now even jogging CSO's minds in that even the kind of targets they are now looking into in their various community engagements are now focusing on youths. The case of Pamoja Trust, for instance. The civic conversations now is now shifting to youths because they realize youths have the power and the energy. So now they are shifting the target, and they're not only shifting the target audience, but they're also shifting the kind of platforms they're using to even send this information. And there are very many, and something that also this surprising has resulted to is the rise of now a lot of youth groups being registered. Youths now organizing themselves into CBOs, into youth groups, you see, and then now they're trying to see where could they get now this capacity.
So the organizing is still happening.
The organizing is taking actually a different.
Different. What do you think is the future? As we are almost done with this conversation, what do you think is the future of the Gen Zs? Just think about in the next how many years? In the next 30 or 25 years, when the millennials are now the ones in their retirement home, and the Gen Zs are now the ones in not controlling really, but in most of the decision-making positions, and now the alphas, and maybe the generation that will come after the alphas, that is generation what now? After the alphas. Because I tend to think this generation thing, it's kind of alphabetical from A to Z. We are now on generation Gen Z and then the alphas. So maybe the generation that will come is generation better. So what do you think is the future of the Gen Zs?
John Tay will be in the right position to
yes, because he's the Gen Z here. Tell us.
He will finalize. But now my 2 cent input would be, I think, number one, people have now, and I don't want to say started, they're now taking Gen Z serious.
Yeah.
Previously, we were not taking them serious. We were thinking, these are idle youths, these are watoto wamelelewa vibaya, and all those kind of.
Someone mtu aliwaita watoto wa kukula KFC.
Yeah, watoto wa kukula KFC, kukula
noodles.
Yeah. But now we actually take wakuingia maandamano na Uber. But now we are starting to take they're actually being taken serious now. Because even if you go to these public spaces, for instance, I was in a PSV and they were seated at the back and they were making noise and saying the way bona ukoenda si tunaenda and all that. Previously, if that would be the case, when someone could say we nyamazeni huko nyuma. But that day, no one told them that because people are now like, these ones are now ndio kusema. Yeah, they know something that you don't know. Akili yao inapiga mara mbili. So I think people have now appreciated that these guys are here and it's their time to take over. So in one way or the other, of course, it's in tiny steps, but people are now starting to leave these particular spaces for Gen Zs to take charge. If you look at a lot of forums being organized, even from the civil society organization forums, you'll find that the representatives of this organization are actually young fellows, not the conventional wazes who sit.
But do you think it would be better with the Gen Zs in power or in control or in positions of decision making?
I wouldn't say it will be better. I would say it will be different. Because now the way we do things will be very different from now the way they'll be doing things. I can't foretell the future whether it will result to a better society or a better governance. I don't want to predict in that particular future, but I will say it will be very different from the way we are doing things. And one thing that I'm seeing is even now what you were talking about, even the working conditions where people come in from 5 to, that one is actually going to shift in the near future. Even the kind of dressings people have, the kind of conversations, the people talk, the people do is going to change. I wouldn't want to say that it's going to be for the betterment of society. That one will depend with a lot of factors. But I think it's going to be very different in the near future, and it's very near. And I think from 2027, when Kenya will be changing its leadership, I think that is where we are going to see now the actual wrath of.
So that's actually the future of governance. What's the future of governance for you with the Gen Zs?
I actually think that the best example to define youth-led governance is the Burkina Faso.
No, umeiweka vizuri, youth-led governance.
The Burkina Faso regime right now, President Traore. I believe that person, he's young.
He's young.
He's making changes in the country by
big changes.
By removing the colonizers, the French colonizers,
corrupt fellows.
So according to me, the youth-led movement, it has already increased political awareness in our youth, because they from now on, I believe that when a youth reaches the voting year, 18 years of age, I believe they will be eligible for election. You know, there was,
be elected in.
There was some kind of, how is it called, ignorance during the past days. You just wait until you are somewhere 23, so you start.
Or when you have enough money to be able to bribe people to get that seat, which can't be even in your 20s.
So I believe that's the first. The second, we are in the digital era. Digital era creates awareness easily from X, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, everywhere. I believe, actually, of late, I believe the topics in the internet are really interesting because they are politically based. You find you learn more about the government than most people do not. And then I believe that there will be, in future, there will be more accountability. Based on the governance that will be present. Because like right now, people don't want to listen to anything. Like all the CS, they can't say anything without being criticized, because people know for a fact.
You have to say something factual, something that makes sense to
something that makes sense, so that people can listen to you and maybe give you another seat the next time.
Actually, don't even make something that resonates with the people. I really agree with what you're saying, because you're talking about it's kind of, you're saying, decolonizing also our minds, and you're also bringing in the element of using the technology and immersing ourselves in the digital era so that we use it for more accountability, for more transparency. So for me, I think that's now the future that I see with the Gen Zs, the future of governance with Gen Zs. More transparency because of a lot of platforms that can be used to talk about political issues or governance issues. More involvement, because again, also the involvement is easier when we do it on technology, which I think is a good thing. But the most important thing for me is more awareness, and also decolonizing our minds on how we see our issues within the country. Because even on the discussions on the finance bill, how we were, we looked at it as a country, but very few people were connecting it to how it connects to the international world, how the IMF is involved in all these things, which I think is important conversation for us to have.
Like Kenya, we should, maybe in future, with youth-led governance, we should not be puppets of the Western states, because that's what is keeping us from moving on as a country, or even maybe as a continent. Not even maybe, as a continent.
It's a continent.
Yeah, I believe good governance and people who will follow the constitution as it demands. Because like the fact that the loans, I heard Jimmy Wanjigi say that the loans that were taken, they were not for development purposes. They were for running the government expenditure, which I believe it's
contrary. Yeah, it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, so we are paying a debt that it was not supposed to be there in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, I think we now come to an end of our discussion on Gen Z and governance, and I think I would like to say Happy Youth Day to everyone who feels youthful and everyone who identify as a Gen Z like myself. We all work at an organization called Pamoja Trust. Pamoja Trust is a non-governmental organization that works with vulnerable and marginalized communities, be it in places like informal settlements or people who live in the rural areas, but they're marginalized because of maybe their geographical location and so on. So we focus more on issues to do with land rights, just advocacy for the citizenry to know what their land rights are, and also rights on other issues like basic rights. That's all for this podcast. If you feel encouraged, if you feel like you need to engage more, let's keep the conversation going. Gen Z wameanza, tunaendeleza. Aya.